Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for asking me to join you today. Special thanks to Chuck and Megan for, getting me to this point in the presentation. I understand that my story serves as your connect to purpose portion of your meeting. And as someone who's spent most of her career in the nonprofit sector, I salute you for having that aspect to your meeting. More entities should do that. And I certainly hope that my story will serve your purpose today. I was asked to share my story as a breast cancer survivor and tissue recipient with you, but it's not just my story. It starts with my mom, Pat. First slide, please. Here we are in the mid-1980s. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but her influence on me continues to be tremendous and plays a big part in my breast cancer experience. She was a working mom at a time when that was the exception and not the rule. She was smart, personable, very socially correct, but with a wicked sense of humor. Most of all, though, she was tough. She was also very stylish. As a career woman before office casual became the norm, she had a closet full of nice suits. For special occasions, she had several beautiful evening gowns and cocktail dresses that were very flattering, and she loved to dress up. Well, Mom had breast cancer in 1973. She was the first person I ever knew or had ever even heard of to have the disease. This was before celebrities and public figures like Betty Ford went public with their battle with the disease. I remember when she sat us kids down and told us what it was and how she found it through self-exam and what she was facing in terms of surgery and treatment. She said that her doctor told her he believed the lump was benign, but that they couldn't be sure until they operated. He told her to be prepared to wake up minus one breast, and that's exactly what happened. She was in the hospital for several days, and when she came home, I remember helping her change the dressing over her incision. It was awful. The cancer was gone, and that was the most important thing, of course, and we were all truly grateful for that. But back then, there was no thought given to how she would look post-surgery. Reconstruction was never mentioned. I don't think it was an option back then. Women were to be happy that they survived and were cancer-free. Anything beyond that wasn't really a consideration. After she was sufficiently recovered, she went to a specialty store to be fitted with a bra with a prosthesis. That was interesting. The bra had a pocket on one side into which she could slip a fake breast so she would appear even on both sides. The problem was that this prosthesis was inflatable. It was a fabric-covered balloon, for lack of a better term, that she had to insert a little straw into and then inflate it to the right size and then slip it into her bra. It was really kind of funny, but extremely impractical and uncomfortable for her. And she said it made her feel a bit unbalanced because, as she was rather well endowed, she was heavier on one side than the other. The bra also irritated her scar. In later years, more lifelike and comfortable prosthetics were available, and she liked those much better. She lived another 25 years after that surgery, never having had cancer again. But I don't remember her ever wearing a swimsuit again or anything low-cut. She told me that she was grateful that she detected the cancer in time and had the surgery that gave her many more years of life. And she lived to see all of her children get married, and she was beloved grandma to 6 grandchildren. And she hoped that my sisters and I would be vigilant about our own breast care. But I know that she felt deformed. Just a few years after her experience, her mother, my grandmother Blanche, was diagnosed with it. She was not as fortunate as my mom, and she died shortly after her surgery. So with this family history, I became very vigilant about the possibility of developing breast cancer. I had my first baseline mammogram in my early 30s and annually after that, much earlier than most women. The year I turned 50, the mammogram showed something odd, and I underwent my first biopsy. I was diagnosed with lobular carcinoma in situ, a breast tissue abnormality and precancerous condition. The biopsy removed the area containing the problem cells, and I started taking medication. My doctor said if I got through the next 5 years without a recurrence of cancer cells, or God forbid, without getting an invasive form of cancer, I would essentially be as good as new. Over the next 3 years, to the best of my recollection, I had 6 mammograms, 3 MRIs, and 5 biopsies. 3 different precancerous conditions were diagnosed. Because of my family history and these constant new developments, and just because I'm a planner by nature, I spent those 3 years preparing for the possibility that I would not be in the majority of women that make it to the 5-year benchmark without getting cancer. I read articles and blogs on various treatment and reconstruction options in case a mastectomy became necessary. I also spoke with a lot of survivors that I knew. At that time, I found 2 options for reconstruction. One was breast implants with tissue expanders. This involves the placement of tissue expanders at the time the mastectomy is performed. Then multiple visits to the doctor are scheduled for injections that expand the tissue, making room for the implants once they reach the appropriate size. Then surgery is required to remove the expanders and put in the implants. The second option I found is called tram flap surgery. This involves using tissue from the patient's own body, generally the abdomen, to form a new breast or breasts. It's kind of appealing from the standpoint of you get a tummy tuck at the same time you're having your mastectomy, but the recovery time is long, the scars are many, and it can weaken your abdominal muscles in the long run. In all of those things I read and learned from reading and talking to people, I never saw anything about the use of donor tissue as a reconstruction option. Absolutely nothing. When you're diagnosed with breast cancer, your first concern is to beat the disease. But there is that secondary and still important issue for most women about what to do about your breasts after the disease is taken care of. It's a plain fact of our society that most women are concerned about their appearance. There are both personal and professional factors, and the psychological and emotional issue of self-image is strong. It goes far beyond vanity. So there are all these things floating around where you're not sure exactly what you might be facing and when you might be facing it. And in my case, I also had it in my head that a victory over breast cancer and the body image issues that come with it would not just be a victory for me, but for mom and grandma as well. So fast forward to the beginning of 2011. That call you never want to get comes. I had cancer. It was very early stage, but it was there. This is where my research paid off. First, I was mentally prepared to have a bilateral mastectomy. Second, one of the women I had spoken with went to 3 different doctors and landed at the University of Michigan Hospital for her surgery and treatment. She highly recommended them, so I went there. I was impressed with the oncologist and her staff, so that's where I decided to get my treatment. So now I was prepared to lose my breasts. The next decision was how to get new ones. The oncologist set up an appointment for me with U of M's plastic surgery department. The doctor patiently and thoroughly explained the 2 options I mentioned earlier. I was ready with my questions, most of which concerned recovery time, resuming regular activities, and any short or long-term physical limitations. I was pretty set on going the tissue expander route when just before we got ready to leave, he brought up another option. He said that he had just started doing a procedure that involved the use of donor tissue to create pockets into which implants were placed and then put in the patient. And the best part is that it's a one-step procedure. When the oncologist finishes the mastectomy, the plastic surgeon comes in and does the reconstruction. A lot of things have to go right in order for this to occur, but I was so excited about the possibility, I think I almost hugged the doctor. I wondered why this option didn't show up in any of my searches, or why the many women I had spoken with didn't mention it as a possibility. In talking to them again, I found out no one had ever heard of it or knew anything about it. So I went into my surgery on March 31st, 2011. When I woke up that evening, I was cancer-free and had new breasts. All had gone as well as possible. By the time the doctors came to see me the next morning, I was sitting up in a chair having breakfast. I'd already taken a slow walk around the ward, and drainage tubes notwithstanding, I felt pretty good. And I walked out of that hospital less than 24 hours after getting out of surgery. It's tough for me to explain how much it meant to me to get through the surgery and recovery period as quickly and easily as I did.
Hi, how are you?
Of every woman I spoke to personally,
I'm all
or
right.
read about on a blog or website, or heard about, I had the best recovery. And I'm so pleased with the result. I don't think I can adequately express how much it meant to me to get through one of the most difficult times of my life, physically, mentally, and emotionally, as well as I did. And if someone thinks all of that doesn't make a difference, I suggest they talk to women who went through other types of reconstruction, some of which take months or even over a year and multiple procedures to get through. I think that conversation would be enlightening. I was determined through my journey not just to beat cancer. I wanted my life back completely. I wanted to not just do the things I'd always done. I wanted to try new things and have new experiences. And I'm so happy to say that that's what I've done. I was every bit as physically active after the surgery as before. I actually took up some new things like yoga and Zumba, and I'm planning to take up pickleball if my knees hold up. I'm looking at my husband because he's going to teach me how to play. And here's a little look at what my post-cancer life is like. Next slide, please. My husband and I have run many 5K races. And a few years ago, we trained hard for a half marathon that ended up getting canceled due to storms the night before. We may try that again after he retires next year. We love to travel. And since my surgery, we've been to Ireland and Scotland, Austria and Hungary, traveled through the Canadian Rockies by train, and we've been to Hawaii and on an Alaskan cruise. Next slide. We are huge Disney geeks, and we go there at least every other year, even though our kids are adults now. As a matter of fact, we're going there with the family next week to introduce our granddaughter to the wonderful world of Disney. Next slide. We're on a quest to visit every major league ballpark, and we're over halfway there. And as mentioned in the intro, I became a grandma. Next slide. This is Ginny. She was born in April, and she's the light of our lives. And I'm so grateful that I have the physical ability to get down on the floor and play with her. Next slide. I started doing some things I hadn't done in years, like painting. Next slide. And I danced with my son at his wedding 2 weeks ago. And with all these wonderful things to report, there's something else that's also amazing that happened after my surgery. I became part of the transplant community. Donor families, living donors, dedicated professionals like all of you that make it happen every day, and recipients, some that owe their very lives to your work. When I left the hospital after my surgery, I was given information about sending a thank you to my donor family. It took me a long time to come up with an appropriate letter. Thank you for the new breasts is kind of tough to express with the reverence that family members deserve. But hearing my mom in my head saying, thank you notes must always be sent when one receives a gift, I finally put something together that I thought was appropriate and showed the depth of my gratitude. After sending that letter off to MTF, I received a call from them. They were trying very hard to promote tissue donation and the use of tissue in breast reconstruction. Contact with Gift of Life Michigan soon followed, and I've been doing speaking engagements and recruiting events for both entities ever since. And I do so with a deep respect and joy at being part of this amazing community. When Gift of Life Michigan has their annual donor family event, I volunteer to help, and I end up crying like a baby at the stories and the photos and the quilts with squares made by each donor family. And it's emotionally draining. And it's also one of the most meaningful things I do every year, and I just won't miss it. As I wrap it up, I want to leave you with some inspiring images of donors and recipients. As mentioned, I was honored and humbled to represent tissue recipients on the Donate Life float in the 2014 Tournament of Roses parade in Pasadena. Next slide. Through that awesome experience, my husband and I met so many other recipients. Many of them were organ recipients, but some, like me, benefited greatly from tissue or skin, bone, or corneal transplants. And while these were not life-saving circumstances, they were certainly life-enhancing. We also had the honor of meeting many donor families. Next slide. On this picture of the float, you can see the fluorographs of donors. Many of those families were there and worked side by side with recipients on the day we all helped with float construction and decoration. Again, my words can't do justice to the emotional bonding that took place. I have so much respect for donor families. At the darkest moment in their lives, they made the decision to either honor their loved ones' wishes regarding donation, or they made the choice on their behalf that their loved one would have wanted their last act to be one of giving. And then there's all of you. I cannot even imagine how many people owe their very lives to your work. Plus, people like me that owe you a huge thanks for giving us peace of mind, quality of life, and in my case, the ability to say that cancer took nothing away from me that I didn't get back through your work. So thank you for having me join you today, and thank you for everything you do every day.